Hey everybody, Harv here. Let's continue our lecture on World War II. Uh, we've been talking about the war, the progression of the war, and a lot of the battles and the experiences of what the soldiers were going through. But the home front uh, was equally as important. As we talked about in World War One, the importance of the factories, women working in the factories. We're going to see, the home front is really important as well. And we're going to talk kind of, about the home front for some of our major European countries. For Germany, at the very beginning of the war, 39, 40, even 41, Hitler is going to, the German people aren't really going to feel the full, effect of the war. Hitler demanded few sacrifices from the people when it came to material goods, when it came to food, raw materials. But with the Soviet Union, that's going to change. At the very beginning of the war, Hitler's with his blitzkrieg tactics, they rolled over Poland, they rolled over Belgium, Netherlands, Norway, Denmark, and France, and they simply were taking their food, taking their raw materials, and so the German people weren't really stretched too thin. But with the Soviet Union, with their failure to defeat the Soviet Union so quickly, we're going to see Hitler really have to mobilize the full power of their German economy. People are going to start having to ration, gasoline, food, and so people are going to finally start to really feel the effects of the war. And also, once America jumps into the war, and Germany is going to be pressed even further, in the Mediterranean, in North Africa, and eventually with D-Day, it's the people. Germany is just going to be stretched so thin on the home front. And so, with the Soviet Union getting involved, with the United States getting involved, Germany's going to have to mobilize for total war and take complete control of their economy and society. By 1943, 44, at the latter stages of the war, Germany's going to have severe labor shortages, and that's partly because they're taking so many losses in the battlefield. You're going to see teenagers be not just, fighting in the army, but teenagers going to be forced to, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids be forced to join the factories. Women are going to be working the factories again. The elderly are going to be working the factories again. You're going to see the elderly go out and fight. You're going to see, young kids fight. And propaganda, as we talked about in World War I, is going to be a huge part of influencing the German people. Propaganda is going to, boost morale. And also hide the truth. Hitler, and this is really true for a lot of the countries, same in Japan and, in the Soviet Union as well, is that they're going to, always portray things in a positive way for the people, so the people will support them and will not lose support. And the guy behind this for the Nazis, Joseph Goebbels, he was their propaganda minister, and he was very influential during the war and when Hitler was rising to power, to sway the public opinion. Okay, we're gonna see with the Allies bombing them relentlessly on the home front, Germany's gonna be obliterated during the war. People are not necessarily going to lose faith in the war effort, but Germany is really going to suffer from when the Allies start bombing, and really suffer when they start losing the war. The Russians are going to be closing in from the east. The Allies, Britain, the Free French, and the United States will be closing on from the west. And eventually, at the end of the war, Germany is just going to be completely obliterated and annihilated. Okay, and here is an example. Okay, here's the city of Cologne. It's more in the south of Germany. I've been there. I've been to this cathedral. This cathedral got hit with a couple bombs, and there's still some of the scars on this cathedral. You can see these blackened scars right here. You can see the city was completely devastated. I think there's a jet flying overhead right now. Very famous tank battle took place right at the bottom of the cathedral. There was like a German Panther tank, and it took out a whole bunch of United States tanks, and there's a big tank battle right there. But pretty incredible picture. And this is the norm for Germany. Obliterated. Okay, France. All right, I want to quickly talk about France at home and France and what happened to France. So in 1940, with their armistice, obviously we know that the French were defeated. This is going to allow the Germans are going to occupy the northern part of it. Okay, and in the southern part of it, you're going to see Pétain, Philippe Pétain. He was a World War I hero of the French. He is going to be kind of set up this fascist French government in the south, and it's called Vichy France. All right, they collaborated with the Germans. It was kind of it was a very conservative government, and Pétain was in charge of that, and he was kind of forced to do this. He really didn't have a choice. But in Vichy France, they're going to be just like the Nazis, encourage extreme nationalism. They're going to be very anti-Semitic. View people who are not who they consider undesirable in a negative light. Okay, we're going to see Vichy France really take a lot of the French Jews out of the country and transport them across to the German concentration camps and death camps to be killed. And France is really going to struggle a lot during the war. There's going to be massive shortages of food, supplies, and it makes sense. Their country has been kind of almost split in half, and their military has been defeated. You're going to see you're going to see a free French government form and really cooperate with Great Britain. Charles de Gaulle is going to be the leader of this, and we will talk about him in the Cold War and in the 1950s and 60s. He's very important. We see after the war ends, we see the end of that Third Republic, and we're going to go over all the different republics, first, second, third, okay, fourth, and fifth, and all those different, their empires as well. But France officially ends their Third Republic, okay, and they're going to adopt a new constitution and create the Fourth Republic. And remember that Third Republic started after their defeat, the abdication of the throne by Napoleon III and their defeat at the Franco-Prussian War. Okay, and here's a picture again that shows kind of the propaganda that's showing a desirable France. Okay, kind of showing French nationalism. There's the tricolor, and you can see the undesirables right here. All right, and you see the Star of David right there, obviously associated with Judaism. Okay, Great Britain during this time, ladies and gentlemen. Great Britain, really was the only country in Europe in 1940 that was able to kind of stand up to the Nazis. All right, at the early start, we know that it was for a while before the Soviet Union got involved. Great Britain was pretty much alone. Parliament, Winston Churchill are going to institute a draft. They're going to ration. They're going to take economic control of the British economy. But by 1941, you're going to see Britain is really going to kick things into high gear. Their production will surpass Germany's. You're going to see factory hours increase. You're going to see women join the workforce. Okay. The biggest experience for the British on the home front when it came to the war was the Blitz, the Battle of Britain, when Hitler was bombing the the British relentlessly in order to kind of prepare for an invasion. And during this time, many children during the Blitz were moved to the countryside. And but Hermann Göring and Adolf Hitler really underestimated the German people. When they were doing the Battle of Britain, that was going on. They really thought that by bombing London relentlessly, that would change public opinion. Public opinion would turn against Churchill, and the British people would get out of the war. But it had the opposite effect. We talked about Winston Churchill, right, with his "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing craft. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." Right? That he really embodied the British spirit, and they will not quit, and they will stick it out, and they will fight, and they will want to fight and put up a fight. So the Blitz really is going to, along with Winston Churchill, is really going to keep the British people in the fight, and they're going to still have high morale. It's really going to kind of backfire on the Germans. We're going to see the British propaganda machine be facilitated through this BBC. You've probably heard about that. It is a source of British news today. And the British standard of living will improve during the war. When the United States gets involved and brings food, raw materials, oil, steel, and the Britain is really going to benefit with the United States getting in the war. Because you're going to see, as Winston Churchill said, the might of the new world will really come in and really help the British. Okay, and they're fighting. Here's a picture of the Blitz. This was the toughest time for the British during the war. Okay, all right. More. This is another propaganda poster. This is from the United States. There's Rosie the Riveter, right, getting the women in the factories, just like in World War I, building bombers, building tanks, building munitions. You know, this women played a very important role within the war, and you can see this is May 29th, 1943. Okay. The Soviet Union, ladies and gentlemen, suffered the most during the war. Roughly 50 million Russians, Soviets, will die. And the German attack, as we talked about with Operation Barbarossa, caught the Soviets by surprise. And it was really just ignorance on Stalin's part. You know, that he was warned about this, but he failed to act. He failed to prepare, and it cost him. Okay, and this, that attack really showcased the failure of their foreign policy, showcased the failure of the preparation for war, and showcased the failure of his purges. I mean, his army was leaderless, directionless. They weren't prepared, and they were very fortunate that the Japanese decided to attack the United States instead of them. If the Japanese had attacked Russia from the east, they would have been done. 100%, it would have been over. Okay, so they got a little lucky. All right. But no nation suffered more than the Soviets during this time. Roughly 16 million soldiers were killed. Many were taken prisoners. Okay, their resources were seized. Hundreds of cities and towns taken and just completely obliterated. And the Soviet Union suffered tremendously. And we're going to see, because of that suffering, that's going to be a reason of why Stalin is not going to give up Eastern Europe as he counterattacks in 44 and 45. Stalin's going to say, no, we're not giving this up. We didn't lose 50 million people for us to allow for the Western Europe to tell us what to do. All right. And so it's going to be really important to understand where Stalin and the Soviets come from within the Cold War and at the end of World War II, because they are very upset. It's important for us to think about in terms of this. This is the fourth time they've been invaded since 1812. Napoleon invaded them. They were invaded during the Crimean War, World War I, World War II. That's 4 times. They're going to be like, y'all keep invading us. So you know what? We're going to create our own little buffer state with the Iron Curtain. And that's what we want to do. So it's going to be really important for us to understand that. The government controlled the Soviet Union economically, okay? Stalin conducted the war as the general chief, but the main guy that's really going to be kind of facilitating the war will be General Zhukov, okay? And we talked about that, okay? We talked about, Stalin, he killed so many of his generals and was suspicious that, that really backfired, okay? He wanted to limit the power of the army. Well, that's not a really good idea when the Nazis are, invading you, to limit the power of your army. You need a powerful army. Soviet propaganda was really different than German, British, American propaganda. You're going to actually see the Soviet Union confiscate radios, confiscate tools of where propaganda from other countries could infiltrate the Soviet Union. As the Germans were invading, the Soviets were very worried that their own people, especially in the Ukraine, would turn on them and support the Germans and would sign up to fight. And well, it makes sense, right? Because Stalin has treated the people so badly, has murdered the people, has been awful to the people. And so they're going to confiscate radios, because you bet the Germans were on the radio saying, hey, do you like Stalin? Has he been treating you well? You can sign up and fight for us. So he did not want German propaganda, Italian propaganda, Axis propaganda to get to the people, because, well, that would really undermine him, and that would really hurt his war effort. So he's actually Soviet propaganda is going to be very different. The Soviets are going to call the war the Great Patriotic War. They still call it the Great Patriotic War today. And Stalin, when he goes out and talks to the people, he's going to really use a lot of nationalism to motivate the people. He's going to be bringing up Napoleon. Hey, he's going to be telling the Soviets and the Russians this is the same as the 1800s when Napoleon came in, and guess what? He lost. All right. Stalin's going to use a lot of nationalism and the different means of propaganda to really control the people. Okay. Within occupied portions of Western Russia, there was active resistance against the Germans, but there was support for the Germans as well. Okay. And you're going to see a ton of novels, a ton of literature coming out talking about the war. Okay. After the war is over, and this is important for us to understand because we're getting ready for the Cold War, Stalin and the Soviet Union will emerge victorious, okay, and are going to be superpowers in the world. And there's going to be two superpowers in the world for the Cold War. There's going to be the United States and the Soviet Union. Okay, Stalin's going to be very victorious from this war, and we're going to see him exploit that. Okay, now let's talk about the preparation for peace, okay? We know, ladies and gentlemen, the Soviets and the capitalistic countries did not get along. Let's think back to World War I, Russian Civil War, right? Okay, who supported the whites? Who supported the reds? Well, we know that the Allies and a lot of the capitalistic nations did not support the reds. They supported the whites. Remember, we talked about this in class, that the communists, the Soviets remembered that. Stalin remembered that, okay, big time. All right, and their differences, this lack of trust is really going to facilitate another flawed peace settlement and the Cold War that will follow World War II. Now, before America entered the war, Roosevelt and Churchill met and agreed to this Atlantic Charter, and I'm going to talk about this, but they were just kind of talking about what would happen if the United States got in the war and what kind of peace treaties should they look for. Now, when the war is actually going on, we're going to see the big three, Roosevelt, Stalin, Churchill, meet multiple times, okay? And there's going to be 3 meetings, okay? In 2 of them, you're going to see Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill meet. In the very last one, okay, you're going to see Truman, and I believe it's Attlee and Stalin meet because we're going to see some of the leaders have changed. Roosevelt's going to die, and Churchill will be replaced. But the first time they all met together was at Tehran, okay? And the big 3 are Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill. And they agreed, okay, what they agreed on was that the United States and the British, okay, would open a Western Front, okay? And Stalin is going to agree to attack Japan when Germany was defeated, all right? The big thing that Stalin wanted, and one thing that really drove his suspicions, were that Russia was being obliterated on the Eastern Front, okay? They were struggling, and Stalin kept saying, hey, we are being slaughtered by the Germans. Can you open up a second front and divert German attention? And America and Roosevelt and Churchill said, we are not strong enough yet. We are trying, and what they were trying, and it was true. They weren't ready for it yet. Okay, America. Remember, the British don't traditionally have a big army, so they were building their army. And the British were at this time really trying to hold on to North Africa. They could not afford to lose the Suez Canal, and they also wanted to not try to knock Italy out of the war, and so they can control the Mediterranean. All right, America getting out of the Great Depression. Was diverting supplies to the Pacific to fight the Japanese and Europe, okay? And America was just starting to, and it was taking time to build up their industrial capacity and build up their military as well. So Stalin was very suspicious because they kept saying, we can't do it right now. And Stalin was just like, yeah, right, whatever. Yeah, you're playing with me. All right, you're just playing with me. And so there was a big gap. But in 1943, finally the Allies will agree on D-Day and say, hey, we will open up a Western Front. By 1943, they have kind of gotten into Italy a little bit, and they have taken control of North Africa. So they are going to be ready to open up the Western Front. But Stalin was really upset that they didn't do that earlier because the Russians were suffering so much. Okay, the next meeting is at Yalta. That's on the Crimean Peninsula. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Tehran is in Iran. Okay, so that's in the Middle East. Then this next one was in the Soviet Union, was in Yalta. It's on the Crimean Peninsula. They met, and Yalta is the last time the big 3 are going to all meet together. Okay, the Americans were encouraging Russia to join the war against Japan. Okay, and Roosevelt is going to encourage, hey, this time let's make a United Nations. We're gonna make this multinational organization for world peace, but this time the United States is going to join. Okay, and here's a big one though. Okay, is Roosevelt and Stalin and Churchill are going to agree that in Eastern Europe there will be free elections. Okay, so after the war is over, Poland, Austria, Germany, okay, Czechoslovakia, any of those countries, okay, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, they can have free elections. Okay, I'm not going to. Stalin says I won't impose communism on them. I'm going to let them kind of decide on what government they want. That was a really big concession. Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin were getting along. Okay, they were cooperating well. They didn't necessarily trust each other, but there was a sense of cooperation that was important. However, things are going to change. All right, Roosevelt dies. Okay, Roosevelt is going to die, I believe, of a brain hemorrhage. Okay, and Churchill is going to be replaced by a new prime minister. That means Stalin's the only one that's left. Okay, and we are going to see Truman. He's going to be a little abrasive and aggressive, as will Attlee. And Stalin's quickly going to say, no, I'm going to reverse. You don't know me. I'm going to reverse my positions. You don't know me. I don't know you. We don't know each other. I didn't say that. Hey, guys, did I say that I was going to allow free elections? I don't remember saying that. Okay, that's going to be Stalin. That's going to be his kind of ideology. I don't remember that. You don't know me. All right. So Stalin's going to reverse his position on Eastern Europe, saying there will be no free elections and that he will impose communism. And there is a big key facilitator for the Cold War, ladies and gentlemen. In 1945, they're also going to agree to divide up Germany into zones, and we will see that in the Cold War. The West will be controlled by the Allies, the democratic capitalist countries. The Eastern Germany will be controlled by the communist country. Okay, let's finish up. Let's talk about the results and effects of the war. Human losses were staggering. Millions died. Europe obliterated, devastated. Millions of people are relocated, homeless. We're going to see the map change yet again. Okay, we're going to see this era of decolonization. We're going to see Western Europe really weaken, and the United States kind of step to the forefront in the world stage of international politics. We will see the Cold War be facilitated from World War II, okay? And we have two superpowers now who are really going to embody the Cold War. You have the USA, democratic capitalistic, and you have the USSR, communist totalitarian. And we are going to see them try to expand their spheres of influence throughout the rest of the world. Okay, and here is a picture of Germany, and we're going to see Germany be divided up from west to east. We're going to see this Western Germany be controlled by the United States and the Allies, and we're going to see Eastern Germany and Eastern Europe be controlled by the Soviets and the Russians. Okay, and here is a picture, I believe, at Yalta. Okay, and here's Churchill. All right, there's Roosevelt. Roosevelt, you can see, he does not look very well. He was very sick during this time. Roosevelt also was stricken with polio, ladies and gentlemen. He could not walk. Okay, but Roosevelt was only a few weeks away from dying. Okay, and we are going to stop here and start our new lecture, chapter 21 on the Cold War, next. Thank you.